When you look at that tall building, it looks overwhelming. Other buildings, maybe a half mile down this way or that way, will look smaller. We don't really have a good perspective from this point. Let's look at the last picture. This is a helicopter ride over New York City. Now we're getting a right perspective of the comparative importance of different buildings and their height. You have a better perspective the higher that you are. Without the right perspective or eye view, we don't get a good view of things. Perspective is a point of view that will differ according to where you are in your life, how you value yourselves, how you value other people. Something that is out of perspective doesn't have the correct size or position of the objects in that picture. Now, we can always agree that the Lord has the proper perspective. We're going to find out today, and I found out this week, I don't always have the proper perspective when it comes to things. So one of the challenges in this life, and certainly today, is to start seeing things a little different than we have in the past. In Luke chapter 15, remember, we read the parable about the prodigal son. And he wasted his inheritance on prodigal living. Let's read about it in Luke chapter 15, verse 14 through 16.
But when he had spent all, there arose a severe famine in that land, and he began to be in want. Then he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything.
So he's having a good time. He's got an inheritance, and he wasted it on prodigal living, and now his fun is over. There's a famine in the land, and he finds himself feeding the swine, and he would have gladly filled his stomach with what they ate. But he came to himself, and he says, I will go to my father. It's the only choice he has. I will say to my father, I've sinned against you and against heaven. I want to come home, but I don't want to be your son anymore. Just make me like one of your hired servants. Now let's look at two different perspectives, at least two in the story that we can look at. We can look at the perspective of the father, but there is also the perspective of the brother. Let's read this, the heart of the father.
While the son was gone, the father had a longing for the son's return. When the son returned, the father fell on his neck and kissed him. The father said, Bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf here and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.
But hold on just a minute. Isn't he the one that wanted his inheritance and he didn't want to be there anyway? Didn't he just despise where he was? Give me my inheritance. Let me go. How about all of that? See, what's in question here is not the bad behavior of the prodigal son. What's in question is how he is to be treated when he returns. So we're going to have two different perspectives. We saw the father's perspective, but let's look at the heart of the brother.
He was angry and would not go in. He said, These many years I have been serving you. I never transgressed your commandment at any time, and yet you never gave me a young goat that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this son of yours came, who has devoured your livelihood with harlots, you killed the fatted calf for him.
So he doesn't even recognize him. Here his brother, does he? He says, this son of yours. In our natural thinking, I think the brother has a point. He's been there with the father. He didn't leave. He didn't want his inheritance. He's been there serving. And this prodigal son has left, and now come on, you're going to make a big party for him? So you see here we have two different perspectives to deal with. Let's think about them. One is a father mentoring perspective, and the other one is a peer competing perspective. You know, a Sunday school teacher will always have a mentoring attitude towards students. They'll want to take everybody to get along, everybody to take their turn. That is a mentoring attitude. But that same Sunday school teacher can go out Monday morning and be on a peer competing level with a coworker and get angry. So it's possible then we can see to operate from both perspectives. Most of us switch perspectives depending on who we are dealing with. In dealing with our children, our perspective is different from dealing with an irritating person that we encounter. Why couldn't the brother see what the father saw? And what is in us that keeps us from seeing what God sees? I promise you, He sees people different than I do. He sees their need. He sees their incompleteness. He knows what He's trying to do in their life, and I don't see that. But He does. You know, we always want to cooperate with the Lord. Colossians 2:10 says, we are complete in Him, talking about Jesus Christ. What does that mean? He completes the soul, the mind, will, and emotions, called sanctification, the lifelong process of becoming Christ-like. God's wanting to complete every believer. Now, if I speak a negative comment into a person's life that is a believer, what am I doing? I'm working out of cooperation. I'm working against what the Holy Spirit is doing. Be very careful with that, to bring someone down. Have you ever heard someone brag about something you didn't think it was that big a deal? I mean, they just, every time you meet them, well, I really do good with that. Look at what I'm doing over here. And you get so tired of hearing it. Maybe if I would take the time to say, you know what? That really is good that you do that. I see that. And the next time they say it, I really do good in that. Yes, you do. Maybe I would help complete them and they'd quit talking about it. That's a good idea. But people are needy, aren't they? But God wants to bring everyone. Why? He's from a different perspective than we are. When we are down here, encounter a person, remember the picture. We see ourselves bigger than anything else many times. So this became very real to me. I picked this picture by accident. And later I saw what the Lord was trying to say about perspective. Let's look at another parable in Matthew chapter 20, verses 1 and 2.
For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. Now when he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard.
So he wasn't satisfied with who he'd hired. He needed more people, but there was no one out there he could find. So he goes out about the 3rd, the 6th, the 9th, and the 11th hour. They're working a 12-hour day here. And he hires more workers, and he says, whatever is right when the day is done, that will I pay you. When it came to the end of the day, he paid everyone the same amount, the ones that started first and the ones that only worked 1 hour. So this is really generous of the landowner to do this. In fact, he overpaid the ones that didn't work the whole day. But this causes him a problem. Let's read about it, Matthew chapter 20, verse 11 and 12.
And when they had received it, they complained against the landowner, saying, these last men have worked only 1 hour, and you made them equal to us who have borne the burden and the heat of the day.
Now, in the natural, come on, that seems unfair. I mean, I hear 12 hours, you got somebody come in the last hour and they didn't do a whole lot, you're paying them the same amount? But see, they had agreed to work for that amount. What's the problem? Too big a picture of self, not a picture of brother. Someone that was out on the street, and the story even tells us we were out here on the street, but no one has hired us. They would have worked if they had been hired. It made me think and ask this question to myself. I'll ask you the question. Maybe you've been more fortunate than the people that you are complaining about. Maybe things have come easier to you in your life, and things have just worked out, and you see someone else. It hasn't worked out so good. Don't ever complain about those. That's the same thing that these workers have done here. These people have come to the 11th hour. Now let's see how the landowner responds to them. Matthew chapter 20, verse 13 through 15.
But he answered one of them and said, friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what is yours and go your way. I wish to give to this last man the same as to you. Is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with my own things? Or is your eye evil because I am good?"
So this is a good landowner. He overpays them. See, the problem from seeing from a lower perspective is that we only see what affects us. We only see what benefits us. How much are we getting? Let's go file a grievance against a landowner. But how about the treatment, the good treatment that person got? Should be kept in mind. The problem with not seeing from God's view is that we only see what benefits us. So have the right attitude, then we move from the peer competing level to God's eye view and attempt to see people as He sees them. A leader that can't do this won't be a leader very long. A supervisor that has a chip on his shoulder will eventually be moved out. Has anyone ever known a supervisor with a chip on their shoulder? I mean, they never had anything in life, and all of a sudden they're a supervisor and they want to lord over everybody. That's not the way it works, is it? A pastor or assistant pastor or a teacher in a church setting. I've got responsibility now. My friend, when you become a minister, you become a servant of all. If you want to be exalted, go out in the world and do it. You can't do it in the house of God. There's no room for it. There's no room to lord over anybody or make anybody do anything. There was a man told me one time, he said, I went on a fast, and I told my pastor I went on a fast this week for 3 days. And his pastor said, "Don't you ever go on a fast without running it by me first." And he said, I left that church. Don't you agree that he should have? So a mother can be nurturing and loving to her children, but not so much with her coworkers or peers. It's amazing how this works. It's really a daily choice to take out your attitudes and check them in with the Lord. My opinionated nature, my judgments. Lord, I'm checking them all in today. Because I don't want those to dictate how I respond to someone else. We're going to see some other things that dictate response. Love will lift you up where you belong. The brother of the prodigal son was right, and the ones who bore the heat of the day were right if you look at their own perspective. That's the only thing they had to deal with. Satan, the accuser of the brethren, is right. We do not deserve the grace that we've been given. But Jesus Christ has given us grace upon grace upon grace and called us the righteousness of God in Him. And therefore we get what we didn't deserve. It all depends on what perspective you're looking at, doesn't it? Seeing things from His viewpoint will change our analysis of the issues that we are so quick to judge. Oh, we've talked a lot about judging here in the last couple months. Don't judge lest you be judged. With the same measure you judge, the judgment comes back to you. But see, I've got to move out of this small little realm where my interests and my friends and move to God's eye view, to be able to see people like He sees them. And what does that do? That diminishes the view of myself and my interests and the things that I think need to be done. The Lord never asks us to operate from our point of view, but instead from His. What's in the Father's heart that is lacking in me? That's what I began to ask myself this week. Maybe His love, maybe His mercy, maybe His grace, maybe His forbearance, His forgiveness. The Lord loves people into what He wants them to be. And this has been one of the most hardest concepts I've ever had to grasp and realize and work in my own life. Even when He chastises people, He does it out of love. He loves them and conforms them in to His image. He doesn't do it out of fear. Let me ask a couple questions. What can wear away your patience? What really gets you mad quick? And what gets on your last nerve? Now, don't answer that question. I'm just hold that for later. I'm just kidding. I told you this story one time before. A few years ago, I said, you're so much easier to get along with than you used to be. And she looked around, and she said, well, you're the one that's changed. And I thought, what? Me? Maybe sometimes we're the problem, right? It's not always someone else's fault, but we both have changed over the years. As you interact with other people, you will encounter incompletion in them. Now, remember we talked about completion is in the soul. God transforms us into His likeness in the soul, mind, will, and emotions. But sometimes, and many times, when you encounter a problem in somebody else, that incompletion speaks to you. Now, you know everyone has incompletions. Everybody know that? And usually the incompletion in a person, everybody knows about it. And they don't. You might see something in me, and about 50 people in here see it. Oh, that brother is struggling with so-and-so. But I don't see it. And many times we don't. But people are aware of the frailties, eccentricities in us. Now let's evaluate, we've done this before, 2 negative soul conditions. One is being stingy, and the other one is being bossy. They've got to be in control of everything. They're going to tell everybody what to do. This person over here is stingy, just they won't do anything. Won't help anybody. So what bothers you more, stingy or bossy? So we're going to take a vote today. How many it bothers you more to see the stinginess? Okay, now how many it bothers you more to see a bossy person? About the same amount of people. Why is that? Because usually an incomplete soul condition in someone else speaks to your incompleteness. I don't really have a problem with stingy people. I kind of feel sorry for them because I used to be stingy. And so I sympathize with that. I don't look at it in disgust. But bossy people really bother me. It depends on where you were in your childhood. If someone neglected you, was stingy with you, it will really bother you now. But if somebody was really bossy with you when you were younger, that's what bothers you. Can you see how the incompleteness in other people speaks to the incompleteness in us? Now, if you were fully complete, fully sanctified, which no one is, you know what you would do? You would pity them and pray for them immediately. It would never offend you. Now, that's a startling thought. As believers, commanded to love one another and speak good and exhort and encourage, have to deal with our own completeness and realize that we haven't arrived yet. Is what that person just did speaking to something that God needs to help you with? Most of the time, that is true. The answer is found in allowing the Lord to give us His eye view and asking Him for the completion that we need. God's love flowing through us will love people into what He wants them to be. Let's read a verse in the book of Matthew chapter 5, verse 44.
But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you.
Now that's about the last thing you want to do to somebody that's just offended you, to an enemy. Come on. Though I just can't wait when somebody really hurts me. I just can't wait to bless them and pray for them. You don't want to do that. But you know why you do it? The next verse says that you may be sons of your Father in heaven, emulating what God would do. Let me tell you today, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. If you feel like your life is empty and of no value and you're struggling and going through the motions of this life, you have a new beginning today, this weekend, that you can make a change and you say, I'm not going to look at what I need so much anymore. I'm going to begin to look for the needs of other people. I'm going to pour love. It might just be a kind word. It might be running over and open a door. But I'm looking at ways to express love to other people. You can choose to operate today from a different perspective. Let's read Romans chapter 12, verse 10.
Love one another with brotherly affection as members of one family, giving precedence and showing honor to one another.
So as the body of Christ, then we're members of one family, aren't we? When brotherly love is present, it will every time show preference to one another. So we have two choices of action. Whenever there's strife, whenever there's contention, you can add to it or you can dissipate it. I promise you around here, I'm always dissipating. Always. There's never a time I want to see something rise up, right? We don't do that. Well, we hope that escalates. That'd be kind of fun to see them fight. I've been in a work setting before where I thought that. We'll let them go at it. Maybe they'll both get fired. I don't like them anyway. Come on. We've all done that. But in here, I promise you, I'm always trying to dissipate. I don't want to see any turmoil. Now, what's happened? I transferred from the peer competing to the Father's heart. That God gave me that heart to be able to do that. And so we never want to add, we want to dissipate. Let's read Ephesians chapter 4, verses 1 through 3.
I, therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you to walk worthy of the calling with which you were called, with all lowliness and gentleness, with long-suffering, bearing with one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace.
You have to bear with one another in love. And the verse says endeavoring. It's a work. It's something you have to work at to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. We can spread that gossip that we just heard, or we can dissipate it. Repeating the gospel is done from the lower perspective. Dissipating the gospel and pushing it down is done from the Father's view. You know, sometimes people siphon off of someone else. You ever siphon something? Siphon is done using gravity. You put a hose, and let's say you want to drain a tank, and you run water up in that hose and then let the water go, and that will siphon that tank dry. It's amazing how that works. But some people are so needy, if they hear gossip, you know what they'll do? So-and-so looked at me kind of funny. I don't know. I don't really think he likes me. I don't really think he's a nice person. Then my response is, yeah, I've noticed it about them. Just stay away. I'll be your friend. What have I just done? I've siphoned all that off that person, built myself up, which is artificial completion. I'm supposed to allow Christ to complete me. I've just built myself up and run the other person down. You see that? Siphoning is a very dangerous thing to do. We never want to build ourselves up or make ourselves feel good in ourselves by running someone else down. We depend on the Lord for our completion. Be a peacemaker. Dissipate quarrels, contentions, arguments. We are able to do this when we have the right heart condition. Now, this profound statement in 1 Corinthians 13 that we're going to look at gives us a description of love. And challenge yourself with each statement on here. It's amazing. Let's read it.
Suffers long, is kind, does not envy, does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, doesn't rejoice in iniquity, rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things.
Bears all things? Well, wait just a minute. I can't bear everything. Love can. You can't, but His love can. There's a big difference. It's choosing to walk on the road less traveled. Not many people walk on it. It's transcending to a higher level. Now, we all struggle with this from time to time. God always deals with people graciously. And the fact is, we have all deserved favor we didn't deserve. Grace upon grace, John 1:16 says. Out of his fullness, we've received it. Could I extend some grace into someone else's life? Freely you have received and freely keep it. No. Freely you have received and what? Freely give. Give what? What you've been given. Oh, isn't that beautiful? You know what? It's the happier life. To let somebody off the hook and let something slide. Maybe someone makes a statement, maybe it's out of character for them. Right? I remember that time I said something out of character. We all do. And so if that happens at home, you think, you know, they don't usually talk like that. That was out of character. I'm going to let that go. Give people a break. You don't have to hold everyone to every thought, word, deed, action. Bless them that curse you. Love your enemies. Pray for them that despitefully use you. When were you not so gracious and loving? The last time you spoke correction into someone else's life, was that done the right way, or do you need to go back and correct that? The analysis might have been right, but the way it handled, the action was wrong. God has specifically told me, love people into what you want them to become. And that's been the hardest struggle of my life to do that. Love them into it. Speak God's love. Point him in my direction, and that's where we're going to see change. Critical words and self-righteous attitudes don't produce anything. I really believe that God is positioning us as a body of believers to do something great. But it's going to require his perspective, his eye view to get it done. If you desire to be perfected in this, the Lord will help you. Would you stand with me today? Praise team, if you would come.
Knowing you, Jesus.